I thought I lived alone until the delivery guy said someone inside had already talked to him. And the thing is, he wasn't scared when he said it. He wasn't confused. He said it the way you'd say something completely ordinary. Like he was just passing along a message. That's the part I keep coming back to. Let me start from the beginning. Because none of this makes sense without the context, and I want it to make sense. Or at least, I want you to understand why I didn't just slam the door and call the police immediately. Why I stood there in my doorway at 2 in the morning having a conversation that still doesn't sit right with me, even now. My name is Ria. I was 23 when this happened. I was in my second year of a postgraduate program, urban planning, if it matters, at a university in a mid sized city. Not a huge metro, not a small town. The kind of place where nothing particularly interesting ever happens, which was part of why I chose it. I wanted quiet. I wanted to focus. I had a one-bedroom apartment on the fourth floor of a building that was mostly occupied by other students and a few working professionals. Decent security, key fob entry at the main door, a second lock on my apartment, a chain. I'd been living alone for almost 2 years by then, and I was completely comfortable with it. More than comfortable, I preferred it. I mention all of this because I want you to understand that I was not an anxious person. I was not someone who frightened easily or imagined things. I was practical, grounded. If anything, my friends would have said I was too rational, too quick to dismiss things that couldn't be explained neatly. It was a Tuesday night in November. I'd been working on an assignment until well past midnight, the kind of deep focus session where you look up and suddenly it's 2 a.m. And you haven't eaten since a sandwich at 6 in the evening. I ordered from an app. Late night delivery place, the kind that operates specifically for students and night workers. Rice bowls, some kind of noodle side, a drink. Nothing memorable. I'd ordered from them before. The app showed a 40-minute wait, which was normal. I went back to my desk, kept working, got the notification that my order was picked up. Then, maybe 30 minutes later, a knock at my door. That's not the buzzer from downstairs. The knock was directly at my apartment door, which meant he'd gotten through the main entrance somehow. Probably followed another resident in, or the fob door had been left propped. It happened sometimes. I went to the door, looked through the peephole. Young guy, maybe early 20s, delivery bag over his shoulder, phone in hand, the kind of tired expression you'd expect from someone working a 2 a.m. shift. Nothing unusual. I unlocked the door, but left the chain on, just enough to open it a few inches. Again, habit, not fear. Order for Ria? He said. Yes, that's me. He nodded, looked down at his phone to confirm something. Then he looked back up. And he said, the other person already confirmed. She said you'd come to the door. I didn't understand the sentence at first. I actually asked him to repeat it. He did. Same words, same tone, calm. Matter of fact. The other person, she confirmed the order. She said you'd come to the door yourself. I told him there was no other person. I lived alone. He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked past me. Not aggressively, not intrusively. Just the way someone looks when they're trying to reconcile two pieces of information that don't match. She called down from the window, he said. When I was coming into the building, fourth floor, she said to come up, that Ria would answer. I want to describe what happened in my body in that moment because it's important. It wasn't panic, it wasn't a scream and run response. It was something colder and more specific than that. It was the feeling of the floor shifting slightly beneath you. The feeling of a sentence not adding up no matter how many times you run it back. I asked him what she looked like. He thought about it. I didn't see her clearly. The window. It was just a shape. Dark hair, I think. She waved. My hair is dark. I have dark hair. And I had been sitting at my desk, which is next to the window that faces the street, but I had not gone to the window. I had not waved at anyone. I had not spoken to anyone. I took the food from him. My hands were steady. I remember being slightly surprised by that. I told him there must have been a mix-up, maybe a neighbor's window. Maybe he'd misidentified the floor. He nodded slowly. He wasn't arguing, but he also wasn't fully convinced, I could tell. He had that look of someone who is agreeing with you out of politeness while privately holding on to what they know they saw. He started to turn away. Then he stopped. She also said. He paused, like he was deciding whether to say it. What? I asked. She said, don't go back downstairs yet. She said to wait. Wait for what? I said. He shook his head. She didn't say. I thought it was a bit strange. I was just going to ignore it, but he shrugged uncomfortably. I don't know. She seemed sure about it. I closed the door, put the chain back, stood in my hallway for a moment without moving. Then I did what any practical person would do. I checked my apartment. I want to be clear about the layout because it matters. One bedroom, one bathroom, an open kitchen living area, a small storage closet near the entrance. There was nowhere in that apartment that a person could hide without me finding them in under 3 minutes. I checked everywhere, under the bed, inside the wardrobe. behind the shower curtain, inside the storage closet. I even checked inside the kitchen cabinets, which in retrospect was unnecessary, but my brain was being thorough. Nothing, no one. The windows were all closed and locked from the inside. The front door had been on the chain since I'd come home at 6 that evening, and I had not taken that chain off for any reason. There was no one in my apartment. I sat down on the couch and I tried to think through it logically. The most obvious explanation: the delivery guy had looked at the wrong window, seen someone on a different floor, maybe the fifth, maybe the third, misidentified the floor number, and attributed the wave to my apartment. Simple mistake. The detail that didn't fit, he had specifically said fourth floor. He had looked up and counted. He was sure. The other detail that didn't fit, the one I kept pushing away, was what she had said to him. Don't go back downstairs yet. Wait. Why would a neighbor waving from a wrong window say that? What would be the reason? I ate my food. I know that sounds strange, that I sat there and ate my rice bowl after all of that. But I was hungry, and I think eating was a way of insisting to myself that everything was normal, that there was a rational explanation, that I was fine. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was scared exactly, more because my brain wouldn't stop running the loop. The delivery guy's face, the way he'd said she, the way he'd hesitated before telling me the last part. I told myself by morning that it was nothing, a strange night, a confused delivery driver. I moved on. But that wasn't the worst part. A week later, I got a message from the delivery app, customer service following up on my order. Standard stuff, rating request, any issues with the delivery. I gave it 4 stars, left a brief note that the driver had seemed confused about the address, but otherwise fine. I didn't mention the rest of it. 2 days after that, I got a reply. Not an automated one, an actual message from a customer service representative. It said that the driver had actually flagged my order internally after completing the delivery. I asked what that meant. The representative, carefully, in the way people are careful when they're not sure how you're going to react, explained that the driver had noted in the delivery log that there appeared to be a second person in the residence who had made verbal contact with him from the window, and that he had concerns about whether the customer was alone and whether everything was alright. He had flagged it as a welfare note. He had been worried about me. That landed differently than I expected, because it meant this wasn't a confusion he'd let go. It meant that after he left, he thought about it enough to write it down, to flag it. Something had bothered him enough to do that. I went back to my building's management office and asked about the security footage. We had cameras in the lobby and in the main corridor of each floor. Not inside the apartments, not at the street-facing windows, but in the corridors. The building manager was a tired, agreeable man named Mr. Olu, who I think mostly just wanted everyone to leave him alone. He let me review the corridor footage for my floor for the relevant evening without asking too many questions. Footage showed me arriving home at 6:00 p.m. It showed the corridor otherwise empty until the delivery driver appeared at 29:23 IMA. Walked to my door, waited, I opened it. Brief exchange, he left. In between, nothing. No one entered or exited my floor for over 8 hours. No one had come to my apartment. No one had left. And yet, I want to tell you about the window. My desk is positioned against the wall to the right of the window that faces the street below. When I'm sitting at my desk working, my left side faces the window. The window has a simple latch. I keep it locked in winter, but in November it can get stuffy with the heating, so sometimes I leave it on the first latch, which holds it closed but not fully sealed. After I reviewed the corridor footage, I went home and looked at that window properly for the first time. The latch was on the first setting, not sealed, just resting closed. I live on the 4th floor. There is no fire escape on that side of the building. The exterior wall is flat, no ledge, no adjacent structure. Getting to that window from outside would be, by any reasonable standard, impossible. I knew that. I knew that then, but I stood there looking at that latch for a long time. Because here's the thing I hadn't let myself think about clearly until that moment. When the delivery driver described the shape in the window, dark hair, waving, he had described it at approximately 2:02 AME. At 2:02 AME, I was sitting at my desk. I beat left side facing the window. If someone had been standing at that window looking out, they would have been standing approximately 2 feet to my left for 8 hours in a corridor that showed no entries or exits, in an apartment I had searched and found empty. I moved out 3 weeks later. I told people it was because I'd found a better place closer to campus. That was partially true. I did find somewhere else, but I want to be honest here. I left because I couldn't sit at that desk anymore. Couldn't work with my left side facing that window. Couldn't be in that apartment after dark without feeling something I couldn't name standing just at the edge of where I could see. I've thought about the rational explanations many times since. The driver was mistaken, misidentified the window, misidentified the floor, imagined the words or misremembered them. The most reasonable conclusion: the one that costs the least. But I keep coming back to what he said she told him. Don't go back downstairs yet. Wait for what? I've never answered that question to my own satisfaction. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe the driver genuinely confused a window one floor up or one floor down, and the words he remembered were fragments of a different conversation he half heard. Maybe I ran into him once after that, about a month after I'd moved, different part of the city, completely by chance. I recognized the jacket he'd been wearing that night. I almost didn't say anything, but I did. I asked him if he remembered the delivery. Fourth floor, November, the girl who lived alone. He remembered immediately. I could tell by the way his expression changed. I asked him one question. I asked him if he was sure about the window, sure it was the fourth floor, sure about what she said. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He said, I looked it up afterward, the building. I counted the floors from a photo I took on the way out. He paused. It was definitely the fourth floor, and she wasn't waving hello. What do you mean? I asked. The way she was moving her hand, he said. I thought it was a wave at the time, but when I thought about it later, it was more like she was pointing down, like she was directing me, telling me where to go. He looked uncomfortable saying it, like he'd been holding it for a while and wasn't sure he should let it out. I don't know what was in that apartment, he said quietly, but I'm glad you moved. I'm glad I moved too. I still don't order food after midnight. And I've never since lived in an apartment where the desk faces the window. Some things you just don't revisit. Some questions, you learn to leave them where they fell. But I'll be honest with you. Sometimes when I'm working late and the room gets quiet and the window is dark, I get this feeling, just for a second, the feeling of something standing just outside my peripheral vision. I never look. I've learned that some things are worse when you see them clearly.